Hi, Eckhart. My question is, what actually happens to someone after they die? And is there some remnant of them as a personality that travels on to another life and begins anew there? After that person dies, do they remember themselves? Do they remember you?
If you only remember this lifetime, in this lifetime you only know yourself as the form identity or the ego, then that identification with form as an energetic residue continues and will seek another form to identify with. And I would say that is the desire to reincarnate. So if you're your desire to reincarnate, you can test it in your present lifetime, and that is the compulsion to identify with mental and emotional forms that arise in your daily life. And that is the degree of consciousness or unconsciousness, the degree to which you are identified, and many humans are still totally identified with the forms that arise continuously in their field of consciousness as thought forms and as emotional forms, which become reactive patterns, thought patterns, emotional patterns, and that's how you know yourself, as that's me, people say, and that's the limit of their sense of identity. They only know themselves as certain formations in their mental emotional field. Now, how long does that survive? Probably not very long, because even now I don't remember that much from my early life, because I'm not that interested anymore. And even sometimes last week, I'm not that interested in keeping memories alive. So the details of your form identity, I don't think survive for very long. The essence survives, and that's the essence then is, to what extent is that energy field an energy field of desire to experience itself, which is really consciousness, not knowing itself in essence, existing in a dreamlike state, and needing to experience more of the same, needing to experience more identification with form. So you can test it in your present life. To what extent are you free of identification with your mind, the mental emotional field? Is there already the transcendent dimension in you? In other words, do you know who you are beyond the form of you? From many accounts we've had of people who had a near-death experience, there comes a moment when you die where the possibility of the formless dimension briefly opens up. It's described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead and reported by many people that sometimes experienced as very luminous field. The formless dimension opens up briefly when you die, according to many accounts. But if you've been identified with form throughout this lifetime, you will not be drawn to that, and so you will flinch, you will withdraw from that, and so you will enter another realm of processing the experiences of this lifetime, sometimes called the astral dimension, which is another experience of form. And the experiences are being processed like a bee coming to the honeycomb. It's not the details of your life experience become irrelevant, but the underlying energy behind your life experiences are being processed. You bring it back. And so you don't really become more enlightened if the body is gone. You carry the state of identification with form. If you haven't gone beyond that in this lifetime, many Buddhist scriptures tell you that the great opportunity for awakening is in this, as this form in the body. A great, precious opportunity. Many people seek advice from the dead, and of course, they may not realize the truth of the saying, just because they are dead doesn't mean they are smart. So the ego would in some form survive, not with all its details, but the egoic entity as an energy field, needing certain experiences, wanting, desiring. Desire body of the ego can be very strong. So the more you're drawn into identification with form in this lifetime, the more you can be sure that you'll get more of it because you want it, you need it. And that's the unconscious state. So the question is, do you know who you are in a deeper sense in this lifetime? If you do, then there's a freedom suddenly, there's the possibility for you not to be trapped in the cycle of reincarnation. But the cycle of reincarnation happens every day. If you're trapped in it every day here, we can predict with some certainty that that tendency on an energetic level is going to continue. So the question is, reincarnation, people ask, do we reincarnate into the body, another body, different bodies? What really reincarnation means, identification with form, that's what it means. Carnate I suppose comes from Latin flesh, but really flesh means form. You incarnate into a new form. That means you don't know who you are except as a form. And so, how do you become free of the compulsion to identify with form? You can't do that after you die. The question is, do you reincarnate on a daily basis in your life into every thought that arises in your mind? You're identified with it. Every emotion that arises that accompanies the thought that arises. Do you reincarnate and then you become that? And so what always looks out of your eyes really is not the consciousness that you are. The light is obscured by this identification. In other words, it's a dreamlike state. And so what looks at you is the entity, which is really a dream form, that is the consciousness that is asleep, that everybody, it's an ancient theme, that we are all dreaming. Consciousness that is asleep, that is identified with form, is looking at you. When somebody is totally identified, you look at them, and all you see is that limited ignorance of a little entity that wants something or fears something. The light is obscured by density. It's a dreamlike state, and the universe obviously wants to experience that for a while, until it wakes up. So death needs to be experienced in this present lifetime. The only real death is the cessation of identification with form. And so you can then allow thoughts to arise and emotions to arise, and you are the space for it. That means the basic ignorance has dissolved. And then you know who you are. And my intuition tells me that then you continue to know who you are even when the body dissolves, because you basically have already died. We're all here because we are engaged in the death process. You are drawn to it because it's not really death, it looks like it's life. We're becoming more alive. What dies is the illusion that we are, the form is who we are. Not just the physical form, but the mental forms. The mind. You're the mind then. Dreadful state. It's a dreamlike state. It's often turning into a nightmare, which is a good thing, because it's not until it turns into a nightmare that the desire to awaken comes. So nightmares are good. The cycle of reincarnation can only be broken today, in your present lifetime, here and now. Many traditionalists wait for the cycle of reincarnation to disappear in some future lifetime, not realizing that this is the opportunity for it is in the present moment, and only in the present moment can you disidentify from form. So that's the essential task. Then you know who you are, and then you remember yourself wherever you go. Then the desire, the need, the compulsion to identify with form again, of course, won't be there. So what happens then? I don't know, as the Dalai Lama says. You go into other realms where the ignorance of this realm no longer applies, the Buddhic realms, whatever you want to call it. Or you can choose to reincarnate if you want to help people. That's quite something. Come back here. The supreme sacrifice. It comes back to the basic question, do you know who you are? Not conceptually. There's nothing to know conceptually about who you are. So, do you know who you are experientially right now? Do you know yourself as the formless, which is also the timeless, that's which is beyond death? And the transition between being identified with form and knowing yourself as the formless is the psychological death, the only real death, which really is an entry into life, true life, truly knowing who you are. So all the people in your life, your family and friends, they are formations, consciousness assuming these dreamlike states. That's not who they are. Here again, can you relate beyond the forms as which they appear? Can you sense, when you are with them, the formless in them? Can you sense that they also are, there's the light of consciousness shining through them? In other words, recognize yourself in the other. So we don't really need to be concerned about what happens after death. We need to be concerned with dying now. So that in the ancient saying, we find death before death finds us. And that's our task. If we don't find it here, then all we get is more of the same, I'm sure of that. Do you recognize the essence of yourself as timeless? And there's nothing to do with any thought in your head. Do you recognize yourself as consciousness itself, formless, right now? Nothing to know in the conventional sense. It's not knowing. In fact, it's letting go of all conceptual knowing. You are the light of the world, somebody said 2,000 years ago. He said two things. He said, I am the light of the world, and he also said, you are the light of the world. Who is he talking to? Is he talking to Mr. So-and-so, who has his little life and his little knowledge and little concerns? Is that the light of the world? And that's completely unimportant. It's a temporary formation. It's like a foam on top of the ocean, a wave, a little foam formation. And it's gone, a ripple effect on the surface of the vastness of consciousness. It says, me, me, and it's gone. And another little ripple, me, me. Am I going to remember me? No. It's ephemeral, it's fleeting. That me is fleeting, and that's fine. We can enjoy that also, the fleetingness of that. But what is the light behind that? What is the light in which the little me that says me, me, what is the light in which that appears? The light of consciousness. So, that is how Gurdjieff, the early 20th century spiritual teacher, talked about self-remembrance. And what he means, of course, is being present, having the awareness in the background of your life. Do you remember yourself? He would sometimes come into a room full of people talking and doing things, and he would say, stop. And everybody had to go. He used it as a device to break identification with form. Stop. Because everybody was engaged in identification with, they were talking about, discussing the meaning of life, what happens after death. Well, I think this happens. Stop. Ah. Oh, that's the answer. That's the answer.
Thank you.